Senator Warren demands probe into U.S. bank failures. Minnesota becomes fourth state to provide free meals in schools. Ilhan Omar warns that the next Iraq will be even worse. Indian media falsely reports that Modi is the biggest Nobel Prize contender. Islamic coin sets aside $40 million for Shariah-compliant projects. Scientists on climate crisis say, act now or it's too late. London lights up for the first time ever for Ramadan. From Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Saamiyah Syed. Our top story tonight, Senator Elizabeth Warren this weekend called on federal officials to investigate the causes of the recent bank failures. She also urged President Joe Biden to fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Warren has criticized him for intensifying financial deregulation and imposing extreme interest rate hikes. She spoke on Sunday with Chuck Todd of NBC's Meet the Press about the possibility of Powell imposing yet another interest rate hike despite ongoing market turmoil. Warren said Powell is responsible not only for dealing with inflation, but also for employment. She said the Federal Reserve is trying to slow down the economy, resulting in 2 million people losing their jobs. Warren said raising interest rates doesn't solve a cost of living crisis driven primarily by price gouging, supply chain kinks, and the war in Ukraine. Former U.S. President Donald Trump said Saturday on his social media platform that he will be arrested on Tuesday and implored his supporters to protest. He called on them to take our nation back, sparking fears of a more right-wing violence. Trump's longtime personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, said on Sunday that his former client absolutely will go through fingerprinting and be photographed if he is arrested. The Manhattan District Attorney is investigating a hush money payment before the 2016 election. Trump is expected to be indicted by a grand jury in a criminal case involving that hush money paid to the woman who claims past sexual encounters with the former president. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said Sunday he wants no protests or violence if Trump is indicted or arrested. Trump's call was reminiscent of how he instigated the January 6, 2021 riots 6 weeks after losing the 2020 presidential election. Hundreds of far-right insurrectionists who showed up then stormed the halls of Congress in a bid to prevent lawmakers from certifying President Joe Biden's win. Multiple people died as a result of the failed coup, fueled by Trump's and his Republican allies' lies about voter fraud. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz on Friday signed a new law providing free breakfast and lunch to the state's roughly 820,000 K-12 students, regardless of household income. That makes Minnesota the fourth U.S. state to guarantee universal free school meals, joining California, Maine, and Colorado. Progressives applauded the move by the Democratic governor. UC Berkeley professor and former U.S. Labor Secretary Robert Reich wrote on social media, "Let this serve as a reminder that poverty is a policy choice." An estimated 1 in 6 children in Minnesota don't get enough to eat on a regular basis. But 1 in 4 food insecure children lives in households that doesn't qualify for the federal free and reduced meal program. That has led to mounting school lunch debts in the tens of thousands of dollars, Minnesota Public Radio reported. Tens of thousands of children are expected to benefit from Minnesota's new law, which could be operational as early as July. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar on Friday marked the 20th anniversary of the George W. Bush administration's invasion of Iraq. Thousands of U.S. troops still remain in Iraq today. Omar asked if Americans have learned anything from the failed war of aggression. She warned waging another such war will have even more dire consequences. In a Twitter thread, the Minnesota Democrat said that 20 years later, the Iraq War remains the biggest foreign policy disaster of our generation. She said it took thousands of American lives and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives. The Costs of War project at Brown University's Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs estimates that as many as 580,000 people have been killed in Iraq and Syria since 2003. Nearly 15 million have been made refugees or internally displaced by the war. This is forecast to cost a staggering $2.9 trillion by 2050. Omar said U.S. foreign policy discourse remains fundamentally pro-war. She was recently ousted from the House Committee on Foreign Affairs by House Republicans. 2 decades after the Iraq War, U.S. universities are awash with defense and intelligence funding. That's according to Nazia Kazi, an associate professor of anthropology at Stockton University who teaches classes on migration, racism, and the war on terror. In an op-ed piece published in Middle East Eye Saturday, Kazi said that cash-strapped American public schools partner with companies like Lockheed Martin. She said this is especially true in working-class neighborhoods. Quoting Nicole Wynn, author of the book Curriculum of Fear, Kazi said that school children learn using hypothetical math problems about North Korean missiles. She also said they take classes called Foundations of Homeland Security. Kazi said war-making has been embedded across academia such that labs and research programs receive generous support from the military. University administrators who vie for defense dollars often come from careers in defense or national security. 3 former staff members of a mental hospital in Virginia were arrested and charged on Thursday with second-degree murder. This was in connection with the death of a man who was brought to the institution from jail earlier this month. According to Dinwiddie County Commonwealth Attorney Ann Cabell Baskerville, Irvo Otino died on March 6th. This was when he was being admitted to Central State Hospital in Petersburg, about 25 miles south of Richmond. The suspects, Darian Blackwell, Wavy Jones, and Sadarius Williams, will later face a grand jury, which will decide whether the case against them should proceed. With the latest round of arrests, there are now 10 people charged with the murder of Otino's death, including sheriff's deputies. Ben Crump, a human rights lawyer for the family, claimed that 7 sheriff's deputies at the mental health facility tied Otino and suffocated him to death for 12 minutes. Further arrests may still be made, according to authorities. U.S. President Joe Biden said on Friday that the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin over alleged war crimes in Ukraine was justified. Biden said the ICC is not recognized by the U.S., but it makes a very strong point. He added that Putin clearly committed war crimes. Early Friday, the Hague-based court issued arrest warrants for Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova, Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights. They are accused of unlawful deportation and unlawful transfer of children from occupied areas of Ukraine. The cases will be the first international charges since the conflict began in Ukraine last February. The U.S. is not a state party to the Rome Statute, which created the ICC. A story on London lighting up for Ramadan for the very first time comes with details after the break, so stay tuned and we will be right back. Welcome back. Central London's iconic West End has been decorated to mark the start of Ramadan this week. It is the first time the city has commemorated the Islamic holy month this way. Piccadilly and Leicester Square have been lit up with the message Happy Ramadan. Lights featuring crescent moons and stars, as well as traditional lanterns known as fanus from the Middle East, have been used to decorate the areas. 15% of Londoners describe themselves as Muslim. This comes days after the UK's oldest company and official maker of coins, the Royal Mint, announced that it has issued a gold-minted bullion depicting the Kaaba. The leader of the Taliban has ordered Afghan officials to fire relatives that they have hired to government positions. Hebatullah Akhtundzada's decree says officials should replace appointed sons or other family members and refrain from hiring relatives in the future. When they took power in August 2021, the Taliban dismissed some senior staff while others fled. Now, allegations have surfaced that an inexperienced staff have been hired based on their personal connections. The country has faced a deepening economic and humanitarian crisis after sanctions were placed on members of the Taliban government. Afghanistan's central bank's overseas assets have also been frozen. Most foreign funding has also been suspended. The government's treatment of women is one of the reasons for international outrage that has led to sanction as the country's economy collapses. Girls and women are currently barred from secondary schools and universities in most of Afghanistan. The Times of India tweeted that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the big contender for the Nobel Peace Prize this year. To back up its claim, it quoted Nobel Committee Deputy Leader Usle Toye, who is currently visiting India. Several other Indian media organizations, along with right-wing accounts on social media, also suggested that Modi could be a frontrunner for the Nobel Peace Prize. This prompted Toye to dismiss it, saying it was nothing more than false news. After obtaining an unprecedented $200 million from private investors, Islamic Coin has launched its grants and investment programs for Shariah-Compliant projects. The program earmarks $20 million in US dollars and $20 million in Islamic coin. Each investment and grant will undergo rigorous ethical and Sharia evaluations. The project has formed its own Sharia board headed by Sheikh Dr. Nizam Muhammad Saleh. Bloomberg has called Yaqoubi the gatekeeper of the $2 trillion market for Islamic financial products. Muhammad Al-Kaf Al-Hashmi, a co-founder and member of the executive board, expressed his pride in launching the initiative. He said, "We look forward to many exciting proposals from our dedicated global community." Scientists have delivered a final warning on the climate crisis as rising greenhouse gas emissions push the world to the brink of irrevocable damage. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, is made up of the world's leading climate scientists. It set out the final part of its mammoth 6-assessment report on Monday. This report is a clarion call to massively fast-track climate efforts by every country and every sector and on every time frame, said UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He said the IPCC's report is a how-to guide to defuse the climate time bomb, as it shows the 1.5-degree limit is achievable. But Guterres said it is imperative for governments to urgently work toward a number of benchmarks. Those include phasing out of coal by 2030 in OECD countries and 2040 of all other countries, seizing all licensing or funding of new oil and gas, and shifting subsidies from fossil fuels to a just energy transition. And that's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.